be here today, and I would like to introduce to Leonardo Grimaldi. Leonardo is originally from Venezuela, but he's had various academic and professional experiences, some of which I'd like to highlight. He has a Master of Business Administration from London Business School, Master of Science from Stanford University, undergraduate degree from Tufts in Economics and Engineering. He's had experiences in finance consulting at firms like Cornerstone Research. He rose to be a Director of Equities at Credit Suisse in London, as well as working in the CFO office at Walmart Mexico. Nowadays, he's the head of the family office for practice at the Bulb in Mexico City. So he's had various experiences in finance and business all around the world. So thank you very much, and please join me in welcoming Leonardo Grimaldi.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I'm really thrilled and very excited to be here with you all. And I publish a newsletter every 2 weeks or so in LinkedIn, but I talk about markets and investments. But if you go through my feed, you practically won't see anything about myself. I'm a pretty private person. But given the audience today, I thought I would share my personal journey and some golden nuggets of what I think has taken me to where I am today. So I will speak from the heart. And before I do so, I want to thank Santiago, Federico, and Juan for the very kind invitation. I'm really very excited and very honored to be here with you all today. I was sitting in your seat pretty much 25 years ago here in Boston. So this journey is pretty much, it could be yours. And the picture that I have here is an idea that the journey is totally open. There are no fixed lanes in life, so you can just create your own journey as long as you're strategic and with the choices that you make, and also you have to work very hard. So none of this came from ChatGPT. This is all my own. All the errors are my own. So let's get started. And I'll leave some questions at the end. Please feel free to ask me anything. I'll try to be as useful as I can. So this kid here is me. I was born and raised in Caracas, Venezuela, and I had a very happy childhood. I went to a regular private school in Caracas, and my school was very solid academically, but it was pretty much about that. There were really, if you wanted to do sports or you wanted to do outside activities, you had to do that somewhere else. So my dad worked as the chief operating officer for a local consumer goods company, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And she was basically, making sure that my siblings, my brother, my sister, and I were in the straight and narrow. So, but I think, now that I think about it, taking some time to think about this presentation, what they really did was to instill a lot of self-confidence and agency into my siblings and I. And by agency, what I mean is just getting things done, just moving and taking action. That's the most important thing. Don't plan for the perfect opportunity. Don't plan for the perfect anything. Just start moving, and just moving is the most important thing. And then the self-confidence, I don't really need to explain that. Well, you'll gain that with experience. But just having that strong belief that you can achieve anything that you want, or anything that you set your mind to if you work hard for it. And the other thing that they did is that they, somehow put this in our heads, this operating system that has to do with the same things. It has to do with values and with working hard. And similar to what Angel was saying before. And the lucky thing is that I carry that with me wherever I go. So Santiago in the introduction mentioned that I had lived in London, in New York, in San Francisco, and it's the same thing. Just you carry that and that mentality of working hard and just trying to be as useful as you can. And my mom has this saying that it's actually very similar to what Angel just said, but it's that your attitude and not your aptitude that determines your altitude. And I'm 100% convinced about that. I've worked in places where there are brilliant people, and somehow they don't, go as far as they could because they just don't have the right attitude. They think they're, too smart or something. And I've seen people with less raw IQ that are just like, they're just a machine and they keep going and going. And I think that's so important. So just remember that quote whenever you have the opportunity. Outside of education, my parents didn't really splurge on us. And I've been living in Mexico City for the last 10 years, and I can definitely tell you about splurging. Okay. So my school was pretty mixed and had all kinds of people in there. And I'm not really sure what the official policy on bullying was, but I definitely had to learn how to negotiate and how to defend myself. So I'll just give you a couple of examples, and I'm sure you can relate. So, for example, if I was sitting in class and I didn't secure my backpack or the strap of my backpack to the chair, somehow my backpack would make its way to the back of the room and then fly out the window 3 stories down. Or you could be sitting in physics class and then your friend right behind you would grab a lighter and then put it right here, and then you and then you feel your back end pretty much on fire. So that's the sort of place that I grew up in, and I couldn't have asked for a better friends or better childhood. But what this really taught me was to connect with people at a deep level and to empathize with all kinds of people and to really get at what they were thinking, at what their pain points were, so that I could connect with them. And I find this very, very interesting. I mean, although I studied engineering, I think I really should have studied psychology, because I find that absolutely fascinating. And it's really a joy for me to try to figure people out and try to understand how people think, because I'll get that into a second, but I think that's very, very important. If you can connect with people and really understand them, especially what Angel was talking about in the age of AI, that it's machines, but if you can connect with people at a deep personal level and understand them, that's super critical. So these traits of connecting with people have served me very well as a private banker, which is my current profession. So today I need to be good at 2 things. The first one is understanding people's needs and fears, particularly but not exclusively on financial matters. And then the other thing is helping them navigate their financial affairs. So part of the job has to do with the technical part, and it's what you're learning in school, in finance, accounting, economics. So understanding market cycles, understanding valuation, where interest rates are going, which sector is better, what's going on in different regions, different sectors, etc. So it's quite technical, and I think some people it's easier, that part for them. But the harder part is the emotional connection. So how do you gain trust? And I haven't studied this anywhere. It's just from doing it and from asking people who are a little bit more senior, ahead of the curve than me, how do you gain people's trust? And my conclusion, I haven't really looked this up anywhere, but it's just a consistent demonstration of good judgment under uncertainty. It's not just one time. You have to do it and do it and do it over again. And the uncertainty part of that is also very important. We live in an age where today a single tweet can start a war or stop a war and throw prices up or down 10%. So it's pretty crazy. So we're living in that sort of situation. So having that emotional connection is very important. And also, people need to feel, my clients need to feel that I understand them. So if they tell me, for example, that his wife is going through some sort of medical procedure, I could just send a 3-line or 1-line WhatsApp and say, hey, I hope everything goes fine today. Boom, it's like just that little touch. Or she says, hey, my son really wants to get into Boston College, and then they get the acceptance. I could go and order like a quick, like a cap or something for them and send it over. Boston College dad, wow. It's like, you just like, but you have to be there and really understand and hear what they're saying. It's super, super important. So for me, the ultimate goal of somebody in my profession, in being a private banker, is to become a trusted advisor. And what that entails is that they start confiding in you all kinds of things. Not necessarily, I would say 10% is only the finance part and the planning and the portfolio and all that sort of stuff. But it's really about understanding their dreams, understanding their fears, what are their plans for themselves and for their families. And once you are in this position, it's really interesting. At least it gives me a lot of personal satisfaction to be in this sort of position. You know, to feel useful and to feel trusted, to me, is very important. Okay, so I need to tell you a little bit about what motivated me to get into private banking. So let me describe my background a little bit more. So everyone makes decisions based on what they experience, their own experience. Everybody. You think you do not, but everybody does. You have your own lens, and you see the world through your lens. So somebody who grew up in the Great Depression will have a totally different experience that somebody who grew up today. They don't, it's just what they see. So you have these filters, and you need to be aware of those filters. So for me, growing up in the early 1990s, what I experienced in high school was 2 coups in 1992. I remember being in Caracas at the time and F-16s flying on top and a lot of chaos and the military in the streets and all that sort of thing. My parents and their friends were talking about how bad the political and economic situation was. I didn't really understand what they were talking about, but I could sense that people were, things were not good. People were looting the streets, looting the stores. It was a very difficult situation, which ended, of course, with Chavez being democratically elected in 1998. Because for me, in high school, we had heard that Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world. It's a rich country. And we had come from this experience that Venezuela had the highest GDP per capita in the 1960s and 1970s across all of Latin America. So in school, my teachers told me that we were a very rich country, and then I didn't understand why all of a sudden people are unhappy and we had all these problems with society and everything else. So that's what I experienced, all this social unrest. And then Chavez, being a genius communicator, he eventually became the president democratically, and then he obviously started changing things. So I want to get into 2 decisions that were very, very lucky for me, that my parents made for me, and that changed the course of my life forever. So the first one is that once I graduated from high school in 1994, they sent me to the U.S. To a boarding school not far from here, like 2 hours from here, called Northfield, Mount Hermon. I don't know if some people have heard of it, but I had never experienced anything like that, and it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. So you will not believe me, but after 3 months of being at that place, I took the SAT. I had never taken an exam like that, and I took the English part of the SAT, and I got 280, which is percentile 16. Luckily, on the math section of the SAT, I did pretty well. I got 99 percentile. So my overall score was okay, but it was definitely not a good normal score to get into a place like Tufts. But somehow I got lucky. Somebody in the admissions committee saw something in me, and they took a chance on me. So as they say, it's better to be lucky than to be good. So that's something you need to remind yourself. Everything that you have achieved today is, part of your own work. It's also, there is a lot of luck involved. And the fact that you're sitting here being at Boston College makes you very privileged. So just acknowledge that not everything is due to you. There's also a lot of luck involved, and your parents and all of that. So it's important to be humble as well. The second important decision that my parents made, it was particularly my father, is that he sold the majority of his assets that he had in Venezuela and transformed them into US dollars. Because over the course of the following 2 decades, Chavez and Maduro would end up removing 14 zeros from the Venezuelan currency. So the numbers were getting so big that they didn't fit in the calculator. People started talking about billions and trillions and quadrillions. It just got too complicated. So for me, that was a very deep personal experience of what hyperinflation means, what currency devaluation means, but not at the theoretical level. I mean, this is a very personal thing. Like my dad, his friend is an artist, and my dad said, listen to me, please listen to me. Sell your believers and convert them to dollars. And he didn't listen to my dad, and he just saw his his wealth evaporate, just like that. So that was extremely painful for that family, and I have this just deep desire to have never that ever happen to me. So it's a very personal thing for me, this whole Venezuela situation. So that experience, living through, and I didn't personally live it because I was in the US already, but living through that destruction, I mean, if you look at the GDP of Venezuela today, it's 75% lower than what it was like 20 years ago. For me, that's all very personal, and I can tell you stories, but that combined with my desire to connect with people and to have a stimulating, intellectually stimulating career makes private banking an ideal career for me. So let me tell you about how certain specific decisions or moments in the earlier part of my career have led me to where I am today. So let me just start. I talked about NMH, which is not far here from Tufts. And then from there, from NMH, I landed at Tufts, just 30 minutes from here. Now, that school is very similar to this one, except that unlike the Eagles, we're a Division III school, and we don't have anything like the men's hockey team that you all do. And congratulations also on the recent success that you've had with the baseball team. So my strong natural subject is math. So for me, it was to make my life easier, I decided to major in engineering. I did mechanical engineering, and then once I got the hang of studying in English, then I added economics as a second major as well. So at Tufts, I had so much thirst for knowledge. I wanted to figure everything out. I wanted to understand how the world worked, particularly in terms of markets and cycles, and I really wanted to get it. So I just worked very hard. But I will not lie, I had a lot of fun. It was amazing. I'm sure it's a similar experience to you. My best friends from life are the ones that I made at Tufts. And I don't know if it still exists, but I was a regular at MAD. I don't know if it's still around. But it was a very nice club that we went to on pretty much Friday and Saturday. So let me just tell you about certain specific moments. So in the Physics 1 class that I took as a freshman, I ended up writing the best exam of that semester. So at the end of the semester, the professor called me to her office and said if I wanted to work for her in her lab that summer. And I immediately said yes. I had no idea what she did, what her lab did, or anything like that. It ended up being pretty much lab work, studying polymers, and being doing a lot of data work for her so that she could eventually write a paper about it. But I was thrilled. I even took a picture of the first check that I got, which was minimum wage. But I was so excited to have a job and to be doing something. Actually, that was not my first job. The first job that I had was at Northfield Mount Herman. The first day of school, I didn't know this when applying to the school. My parents didn't either, but everybody had to work for the school 1 hour per day, every day. So when I got to my dorm, they say, okay, what's your name? I go, Grimaldi. They look it up. Okay, so you're the janitor for your dorm. And I mean, I really was a janitor for my dorm for 1 hour per day. So that experience to me gave me a lot of gratitude and perspective, and the idea that nothing is beneath me. So just do whatever. And the other thing that I did at NMH, which was very important, is that I never done sports seriously, but I made it to the varsity team for track. And that told me about the importance of sports in general, of consistency in general, and just taking care of your mind and your soul as well as your body. So it's really very important. So then the second year, my sophomore year, I took a robotics class, and again I did pretty well in that class. So then the professor called me up and said, hey, do you want to work for me this summer in my lab? I was like, yeah, sure, of course. What do you do? Well, we do, So he explained it to me. So what I did is I ended up writing the manual for the robotics class for the following year. I did that all summer, so which was amazing. And then the following year, on my junior year, my economics development professor told me about this opportunity to apply for a scholarship that Tufts was starting that year. So what they were going to do is they were going to take 7 students from Tufts and pair each student with a student from China and send them to work to a specific company. So I applied for this scholarship based on her recommendation, and then they paired me up with somebody from Beijing University, and the two of us worked together at Hong Kong Telecom. And that was just amazing. I mean, it was my first opportunity to work at a real company, so we took the subway in the morning in Hong Kong, and then we got there and we had a project and tried to figure it out. And I was beyond excited to have a real job. And then once it came time to graduate, I was still not done with school. I really wanted to continue learning. I had a lot of thirst for knowledge and for that sort of thing, so I decided to apply to grad school. And I asked these three professors who I knew had a good impression about me, and that's how I got my ticket to go to Stanford. And that's where over there, I did a master's in engineering, economic systems, and operations research, which is a mouthful for saying it's a mix of math with economics and systems engineering. So I had a blast over there, and I absolutely loved it. Now, here's an important concept that I want to share with you, and it has to do with this idea. I'm sure there's a fancy name for it in marketing, but I just call it push versus pull, and it's very, very powerful. So whenever you have a task, just focus on that task and don't try to do anything fancy. Don't try to be the CEO from day one. Just focus on whatever you need to do and do your best possible job over there. Now you must you just must work hard and have your eyes and ears open, but opportunities will start to appear to you, and then they pull you. And just develop a reputation for getting things done. It's extremely important. Because there are always people from above, people who are 5, 10, 15 years ahead of you, who are watching. They are always watching. And if you impress them, then they will invite you into their circle. But only if they think that you're up to their level. So people are definitely watching. So this is one of the reasons why I publish a newsletter on LinkedIn every 2 weeks. And I do it almost always every 2 weeks. I have absolutely no idea who reads it. But I've been doing it for like 4 years now for free, and I just write about markets and investments. And then every once in a while, I get an email like this. In fact, I got a client from the newsletter who turns out who's the regional CEO of an oil and gas company. He covers Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean. And then he became my friend, he became my client, we've done a lot of things together. And then eventually he invited me to an offsite where he had his country presidents in that room. So I gave a speech about markets, and then this is one of the country presidents who sent me a WhatsApp, and now she's a client as well. So, I need to back up a little bit. I started out as a financial advisor, being completely independent, working for myself. I tried extremely hard, hustling for my services, pushing, and I had zero clients. Zero clients after 1 year of trying extremely hard. And it was very frustrating. I had 3 kids, a wife, everything, and it was so frustrating. But you have to keep going. So this is another important concept I want to share with you. And it's, for those of you who study finance, which I think is the majority of you in this room, it's compound interest. So I cannot tell you how important this concept is. It's the idea of earning interest on top of interest. But things will be slow in the beginning. It's just slow, but you have to keep pushing. You will want to stop, but you must not. You have to keep pushing. And then eventually the curve starts getting more interesting, and then eventually just takes off. And that's when you start having fun. But it's going to be painful at the beginning. You have to put in the work, because you don't see results at the beginning. But the work that you put in 6 months ago will start to give fruits today. And that's so important. I lived through it. My first year as a private banker, I was completely by myself. I had nothing, and I had 0 clients. And believe me, I was trying so hard and pushing and trying to impress people, 0. And it was very frustrating and very painful for me and my pocket and my mental health and everything. So this is exactly what happens with the Chinese moso bamboo. The first 5 years, get sunlight You give it water, you give it everything, and you see no apparent progress. There is nothing going on, or so it seems. What's really happening is that underneath, this amazing root system is being developed. And then all of a sudden, all that energy that's stored over there, boom, it just comes out. And within like 3 months or something, it just pops up 30 meters into the air. So that's amazing. It's exactly the same thing that happens with everything. You can think about exercising. It's also the same idea. You cannot expect to get fit by just going to the gym once. You need to go 5 days a week for 1 hour each day. And if you do that for months, there is no way about it. You will get fit. You will start getting, leaner, and you will start improving. It's inevitable. But by the way, going every day for 1 hour per day is not the same thing as just going on Saturdays for 5 hours straight. If you do that, then you'll obviously get injured. You need to put the work every single day, or generally every day. But compound interest is also, it can work in the negative way, and things can spiral out of control pretty quickly. So if you start accumulating debt for unproductive purposes, then eventually it will catch up to you. Or if you stop exercising, then eventually you'll lose the level of fitness. If you stop caring for your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your spouse, eventually the love will start fading and you'll lose the connection. So it's something extremely important to just keep that consistency going and not stop. So if there's only one thing I want you to take out from this talk, is to never give up. It's so important, but just keep going. It's so important. Now, so the fact that I'm giving this talk today makes you think that my career has probably been smooth sailing all along, and it's always been up and to the right. Well, I can tell you that nothing could be further from the truth. So this is your expectation of how things will work out. That's what you hope and you expect. But the reality is that, and that happens to absolutely everybody. It has happened to me, and I can guarantee you that it will happen to you. It happens to everybody. I'm sure it happened to Agnes at some point, who had a stellar career. So you have to be prepared for it. So I already mentioned my first year in private banking, where I ended up with 0 clients. Well, after I graduated from, let me tell you about the first major one. So after I graduated from Stanford, I joined the Arthur D. Little Palo Alto office, working in strategy consulting. So they assigned me to a project in Houston, and I was busy, I was learning, I was trying to contribute as much as I could. And this is the year 2001, and things were going fine, or so I thought. And then September 11th happened. And I just kept working. I was going to Houston every week. And then once I got back from Christmas holidays, they called me one day in January and said, I was in Houston, I was at the client site. They called me and said, hey, Leonardo, I'm sorry to tell you that today's your last day at the firm. I was like, whoa, what happened? No, we just filed for Chapter 11, and the company decided to close the Palo Alto office. I was like, oh, wow. And then the worst part of the news came. It's like, well, since you're an international student, you need to find another company that will sponsor your visa, or else you have to leave the country within 8 weeks. And I was like, 8 weeks? There is a recession, and everybody was losing their job. So I was like, oh my God, my parents have sacrificed so much to give me this, very stellar education. And here I was probably on my way back to Venezuela, where everybody was actually trying to leave. So that was very painful. So there's Murphy's Law, right? So things will happen in the worst possible time. You have to be ready for it. You have to always try to plan a little bit ahead. So at that point, I just went full throttle and started sending thousands of emails. I didn't send but I sent hundreds. And in the end, I only got one call back, literally one email back. Hey, we'd like to interview you. And I said, okay, yes, please. And I knew I had this, the clock was ticking. I only had 8 weeks. In the end, this company called Cornerstone Research, they do economic analysis. They called me, and after 8 interviews, on the 7th week, they said, yes, we want to hire you. And I was like, oh, if they knew all the pressure that I was under. But so, you know, again, you have to get a little bit lucky sometimes. So I ended up staying there for like 1.5 years in Palo Alto, and then they sent me to New York for 3.5 years. And it's probably the most prestigious place that I've worked at. It's amazing. It's a very, very solid place. Now, but I want to tell you about the second failure, or not failure, but setback, big one that I had. So after I graduated from my MBA at London Business School, I joined Credit Suisse in London. And, you know, I did actually very well there. I started as an associate, I got promoted to VP, then got promoted to director in the first possible chance, and I thought I was crushing it. It was fine. But then we got pregnant with the third, and my wife's Mexican, so we decided to move to Mexico. So I had an opportunity to join Credit Suisse in Mexico, but no, I wanted to work for like a real company. So I ended up at Walmart. You're thinking Goldman? I say, no, not Goldman, Walmart, which is extremely different culture than what I was used to, right? Working for professional services companies. So I ended up at Walmart, extremely different culture from what I used. To be honest, I didn't really like it. Second day at the company, I was like, oh my God, what is this? Anyway, I stuck with it. I had never managed anybody in my life. In a bank, the whole thing kind of manages itself. You know, you hire people that, you know, don't really love managing. And then I ended up at this place here where I had 16 people under me, an extremely hierarchical organization. So that was a big challenge. So I was a treasurer for the company, managing pretty big budgets. And it was interesting. I learned a lot about like an actual company managing people, cash flows, that sort of thing. Because before that at Credit Suisse, everything was a bit theoretical, like working capital. I never really understood working capital. I got it from a textbook standpoint, but now that I was actually managing money and asking for loans from banks, I was like, okay, now I get it. And so that was really interesting. But then after, eventually they said, okay, you're a top talent. And, okay, great. They gave me 3 jobs. Which one do you want? Because we need to let good people choose. So they gave me the 3 jobs, and I said, okay, I want that one. So I chose that second job, and it turned out to be a complete disaster. So I lasted there for 2 years. I was head of finance for the real estate department. And there was nothing wrong with the job. It's just that my boss and I just didn't get along. So after 2 long, painful years, he ended up firing me, and just like that. It was very, very difficult. So this is in early 2020, and then so after a couple of months of looking for a job, I ended up at Scotiabank, and then the pandemic hit. So I was a new person over there, and then so I landed there, and after 4 months of being in the company, Toronto said, okay, we need to reduce costs. So they laid off 20% of all directors. So within a period of 7 months, I had lost not 1 but 2 jobs. So I can definitely tell you that it will happen at some point. It happens to everybody. It happens to everybody. So don't take it personally. It's just a matter of market cycles and everything. So the corollary to Murphy's Law is this one, is that nobody's coming to save you. And while this can be scary, it's also highly liberating. It means that you are in control and that you have the possibility to do everything that you want. And that's, it's something that has to do, again, with agency, and that's when I decided to start on my own and said, okay, you know what, I'm just going to do it on my own. And it's been fine. So after that, I took some time to think, what do I really want to do? And I learned about this concept. I don't know if you've heard about it, but it's called the Ikigai from Japanese. And it's super interesting. So after you've developed some experience, it's definitely worth it to go sit out there in this beautiful Chestnut Hill campus and just grab a notebook. Do not take your cell phone, just you and your notebook, and just sit under a tree and start, trying to talk about these things and start being very, very truthful and very honest with yourself. And go through this circle. So what is it that you love to do? What does the world need? what can you be paid for, and what are you good at? And in the ideal world, you would want to operate at the intersection of all the four circles. But, so you can go through the different 2 or 3 combinations. Let's just go through a couple. So for example, if you have something that you love, that the world needs, and that you're good at, but you cannot get paid for, then you have delight and fullness, but no wealth. Or if you have something where, it's something that you love to do, and that you're good at, and you can get paid for it, but the world doesn't need it, then you have satisfaction, but feeling of uselessness. So you can go through all the different combinations and try to figure it out, but definitely it's worth taking some time and just really taking that notebook and being very honest with yourself and just try to figure that out. It's super interesting. So for me, when I did this exercise, it's really helping people with their investments. I really like to try to figure out what's going on in the world in terms of the markets and the economy, the cycle, and all that sort of thing. For me, I have a lot of I have a need for intellectual stimulation. I really don't care about fancy titles. I don't care about managing people. I've discovered that I don't really care about that stuff. I care about deep connections, one-on-one with people. For me, having like a fancy VP title or something, it just doesn't fill me. It just doesn't make it for me. So, okay, so enough about me. I want to talk about you now. So many of you will soon graduate from Boston College. I assume the majority of you are seniors. So I guess you're worried about different things, right? You're worried about getting a job. You may be worried about the impact of AI on entry-level white-collar jobs. Financially, you may be worried about house prices and inflation and student debt. For those of you who do have, there are wars going on. That's worrying. At the society level, it seems like the society is very polarized and people don't talk to each other, especially if you go to social media, then you only get fed things that it's your own way of thinking and it's your own echo chamber in a way. Now, for those of you who are foreign students, you may be worried about getting a working visa, and that has gotten more expensive, and if the company has to choose between hiring an American or hiring a foreigner, it depends what they're going to do. You may be worried about ending up underemployed, which means that you are employed but not operating at the level of your capacity or of your training. So it could be frustrating, especially connected to the economic part of this discussion with house prices and rents and everything going up. It's like, am I going to make enough money? Especially if I move to a place like New York, where I'm supposed to be earning a good salary, but life is so expensive there. So I'm going to argue that you actually have a very bright future. I mean, the fact that you're sitting here today at Boston College already puts you in the top 5% of people worldwide. I mean, you really are extremely privileged, and you have to take advantage of it. I mean, it's not over. It's just getting started now. The life is just about to get interesting, and interesting in a good way. So you can make it super interesting and super exciting for yourself. So here are a few pieces of advice I would give to somebody who's, coming from somebody who's 25 years ahead of the journey from you. So try to do the difficult thing first. And, if you're thinking about that master's degree, go for it and put 100% of your energy into it. If you're thinking about that job, just go for it and really go for it. And as they say, I'm sorry for the language, but don't half-ass it. Just go for it 100%. And focus on skills. 2 skills that I would highlight as the most important ones, and I'm talking in the generic sense, is learning to sell and learning to build. And it's not my idea. I grabbed this from somebody called Naval Ravikant. I don't know if people have heard of that from him. Yeah. So learning to sell in the general sense means learning to convince people, learning to negotiate, learning to sell. I mean, if you're thinking about a business, that's your way of getting revenues in. And if you get revenues in, then everything's fine. And then learning to build has to do with building a product, having something to sell, or it has to do with building a team, so managing your organization, just getting structure around your company or your organization. So if you have those two things, you have something to sell and you have a way to sell it, you're done. And you can take that in the more philosophical mode. The other one is building solid habits. You know, there's an actor called F.M. Alexander, Australia. He says, people don't decide their futures, people decide their habits, and their habits decide their futures. So that's really, really important. It has to do, again, with the consistency of putting the work every day. Building a strong network. I was really pleased when I saw you all getting to the room this morning. You all greeting each other very fondly. So maintain that. It's super important. In 20 years, you could call one of your friends sitting right here, right next to you today. Hey, I have this business proposition. What do you think? You're based in Colombia. I'm based here in Ecuador. What do you think? Yeah, let's do it. And it's, if you get a call from somebody who you know, it's so much easier to close a deal because there's that level of trust. So for me, I mean that's what I sell. I sell trust. That's all I do every day. Because now that I started publishing this thing on LinkedIn, I get 5-10 emails every week from random people who want me to sell their stuff. Hey, I have this fund. It's a real estate fund in Madrid. If I don't know them, I just can't handle it anymore because it's too much coming in my way. So I just can't do it. But if it's Santiago who I've met before and he says, hey, I have this fund, I'll take a call and I'll sit down and we'll do a Zoom and we'll go through the Excel model together and then, okay, I get it. And then we can go in and promote it to my clients. That's the way it works. Because who tells you information is super important. And for me, having this pedigree of Credit Suisse, Stanford, Walmart, all these sort of things, people just believe me. And it's just a matter of who tells you the message. It's the way it works. Because if I'm speaking to a dentist, he doesn't really understand all these things. He cannot analyze it. He doesn't know how to analyze it. He just has to trust somebody. It's like when I go fix my car, I have no idea. I know I studied mechanical engineering. I have absolutely no idea about cars. And I just trust the guy, and that's the way it works. So also building a reputation for getting things done. That's super important. As they call it, eat the frog for your boss. Take all that work that your boss doesn't want to do it, and just make his life easier, her life easier, and just get stuff done. And just remember that it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And then for those of you who are thinking about now considering different jobs, I would urge you to definitely think about this. Forget about the top part. Like, you'll want to think about your salary and your job title. Definitely don't listen to that. Focus on the bottom chart. Because, to be honest, nobody cares about you. Nobody cares about you. Everybody's thinking about themselves. They might talk about you for 10 minutes, so don't try to impress anybody. Just focus on what really makes sense for you. You think that people are talking about you, they're thinking about themselves. They're not thinking about you. So worry about your mental health, worry about your physical health, worry about, do you like what you do? Do you have free time, etc., etc. Don't try to impress people. Don't try to impress your parents or your friend or whatever. It makes no sense. And it's definitely something worth considering. Okay, so where do you start? How do you start figuring things out? I know you have a lot of options. And here are 3 simple questions. Again, go and grab a notebook and sit under a tree in this beautiful Chestnut Hill campus and try to, be very honest with yourself. So, what are the 3 things that your friends what are 3 things friends ask you to help them with? What are 3 things you seem to do better than your friends? And what are 3 things you do for free? And if you answer these questions honestly, then you can start getting some ideas of where your vocation and where your sort of compass is. Because I know it can be overwhelming to think about so many options, but this is really where you should focus on. From a young age, you already know where your strong suits and your passions are. So you can just start following that and being really truthful to yourself. And remembering the why. Why are you doing these things? Like having that, the values that I talked about in the beginning, and also if you can connect it with what you just wrote in the notebook, then it will make a lot it will make a lot of sense and make your life a lot easier. So for me, this is the who, right? So this is my family. I even put my dog in there. So, I mean, they mean absolutely everything to me, and this is who I work for. But as I was thinking about this talk, I thought about, and I also work for this kid. I want to make this kid proud, and I want to say, you know what, buddy, we've done all right. We've done all right. Everything's going to be fine. So I want to make this kid, you know, proud, happy. We're fulfilling our dreams, right? And it's super interesting. And the other temporal exercise I would urge you to do, and I didn't invent this, I had to do it for a class at London Business School, is that one day, go again, take your notebook and sit under a tree here with no cell phones allowed, and write your own obituary. No, really do it. Really go and do it. And what is it going to say? I mean, you know, she did this and she did that, and it's all professional achievements. Or is it going to be what impact did you have on society? And then you can move back and forth whenever you have to make an important decision. Do I take this job, or do I move to London, or do I go back home to Ecuador or whatever? And just try to think what would your kid want you to do, and is it going to make it into the obituary or not? And that way you can balance important decisions. But I think it's super, super interesting just to have these opportunities to think about everything. So I think with that, I'll just close it, and I wanted to leave a little bit of time for questions, so please ask me anything. I'll try to be as useful and as honest as I can. Yes, please.
Hi, Leonardo. Thank you for coming in the talk. My name is Leonardo Grimaldi, and after I graduated, you worked in the private bank, doing well. And I just had a quick question on how do you manage that personal relationship and also professional when it comes to something so personal as managing someone's wealth? And how do you kind of sell that trust to your client, especially maybe when times are hard or there's uncertainty?
So what's the essence of your question? Like, how do you manage
that professional relationship that you have with your client and also the personal side? And how do you create that balance?
Yeah, at the end of the day, you have to become their friend. I mean, you really have to understand what's driving them, what's their fear. So you start off, it's just like anything. It's like going on a date. On the first date, you know, it's all a bit like that, and then you start getting more, and people open up. It's the same thing. Nobody will give you their money on the first date. You have to start courting them in a way. And then you start talking, and then they get to know you. Are you a person that they can trust? Do you sound like you know what you're talking about in terms of markets, the technical part? But then it's the same thing as going on a date. Then eventually, if they like you, and you can also say no, you can also, if you like them, then you say, okay, maybe we could work together. And the other thing is that they won't give you all their money from day one. So they'll give you a little bit, and then if things start working well, they give you a little bit more, and then they give you, and then they start introducing you to their cousin and to their uncle and to everybody. So that's how it works. That's normally how it works. But you have to eventually become their friend. If you're too, then they won't feel that connection, and they need somebody, because it's a very, very important position in their life. They only have maybe 1 or 2 financial advisors. So you will want to get close. And they will start telling you everything about their kids and their wife and all kinds of things. Yeah.
Leonardo, thank you for coming today. My name is Eduardo. I wanted to ask you about the time you mentioned starting to get into private bank as self-employed, and that struggle of that first year you were mentioning. I admire that you decided to keep on continuing in that business regardless of how it started out. My question for you was, after that first year of not having any clients, what kind of changed in your strategy? What really was that breakthrough that allowed you to break that barrier of starting to get clients and the causes and everything you were just mentioning?
Oh, thank you for the question, Eduardo. One thing I didn't mention is, again, this pull versus pull thing. So I was doing all this, trying to get attention, and then eventually I got the call from this place, from the CEO of Evolved Asset Management, which is actually doing really well. And then he said, hey, do you want to come here and work here? And then eventually he said, okay, you're running the family office practice. So it's the same thing. He pulled me in. I mean, this job was not published on anything. It was not a recruiter. If you can get the pull again from somebody, it's like the deal is closed before it even started. So that's what happened to me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sure.
Thank you, Leonardo, for your time. I think when we come to these panels, you gave all the answers we're looking for, especially at our age. You mentioned how you're always trying to consume knowledge, and I was asking, what do you recommend for us, especially in the end of the 20s, to be consuming if we really want to be learning about the world's economy or what's going on in the market? Maybe there's a website that you can go. I imagine I can subscribe to the newsletter. But what are some maybe news feeds that we can start following to make sure we're up to date with everything going on?
Yeah, definitely read the Wall Street Journal, read Bloomberg online. On Twitter, there's a lot. There's this guy called Charlie Bilello that I like. He's very good. And his associate called Peter Batuk is also very good. And just start, if you go to Twitter, then they'll start giving you things that are similar. But yeah, definitely read from different sources so that you don't get everything from the right or everything from the left. You get a good overview. And try to be global as well. Know what's going on in Europe, know what's going on in Asia, so it'll become more complete. And then eventually, as you start learning more about different asset classes, like for example, I always knew that I wanted to get into investments. So that's the reason why I took the Walmart job, even though I didn't really like retail personally. But I was like, okay, this is going to teach me about fixed income and rates. And I was coming from Credit Suisse, where I was pretty much an expert in something very, very small in equities. So I knew about equities. Something I didn't mention is that Credit Suisse also sent me to a fund manager. It sent me to a client. So I worked for 6 months for this portfolio manager who managed $5 billion. And I was an analyst in his team. So I knew about that part of equities. And then at Credit Suisse, at Walmart, I learned about fixed income and FX, working in the treasury. And then I always knew that I wanted to get the real estate experience to learn about that asset class. But for me, it was like a stepping stone just so I could get that whole spectrum of different asset classes, because I knew that eventually I would end up leaving and getting into this kind of investment role. So just try to be a little bit strategic about it and learn as much as you can from people, from sources, from jobs. You don't have to stay at a job forever, just 2 years and that's enough or whatever.
For the sake of time, time for I think one more question.
Okay, maybe you?
You mentioned that you left a job from operations.
Yeah.
My name's Mia, by the way.
Hi.
I wanted to know, when you're in a situation like that, where you kind of are having difficulties with your boss or people that you're working with, what is the best way to go about it, and where do you start thinking about
Yeah, that's something that I struggled a lot with. I mean, what happened is that the Walmex CFO was the one who hired me, and I had a very good relationship with him. And then when I joined the company, 6 months later, he got recruited and left. He went to some other company in Canada. So I was left without an internal sponsor, and that's the other thing. It's super important to have an internal sponsor. Somebody who's 1, 2, or 3 notches above you, who can really move you and protect you and look after you. It's super important. The bigger the organization, the more important it is. So in my case, when I switched roles from treasury to this other role, they brought in somebody else who was coming from Brazil. I never met the guy. They put him as my boss, and it was just a chemistry thing. We just didn't get along, and I should have left. I was suffering, really. I was suffering for 2 years, but I was but then it was something personal. I was I'm not going to let this guy beat me, right? So eventually he wanted me to quit just so that he could give me this severance. He got into this little game. And eventually it's I said, I'm not leaving. Everything is fine. And all my projects are up to date. So then he had to let me go and pay my severance. So that's what happened. Yeah. But I mean, I should have probably left if the culture doesn't fit, and I knew it didn't fit. I can't change the place. I should have left, probably.
Well, everybody give a huge round of applause.